Vanguard Life. I am Precious Chukudi, and we begin with the front pages of the papers this morning, starting off with Vanguard. Vanguard is leading with federal government labor reach truce, nationwide strike suspended. Rider says organized labor suspends nationwide strike bid to start today for 1 month. Labor, federal government signed MOU on issues agreed on. Provisional 35,000 naira wage award for workers secured. And of course, we can see a photo story showing government officials, labor leaders meet on strike. 35 persons burned to death at Rivers illegal oil refinery site. 8 killed, 5 injured in Plateau community. APC mocks 8-man NMPP London protest. Slams Kanu governor for blackmailing federal government. Violence, impunity, greed, selfishness won't save Nigeria. And that's coming from Anglican bishops. On page 8, Africa won't rise by prayers, fasting. And that's coming from Professor Lumumba. Embracing effective and strategic leadership, path to Nigeria's progress. You can read more on page 14. Stories above. Manufacturers query federal government 6 months VAT waiver on diesel. On page 13, tribunal sacks a national governor in split decision. Palliatives. Government making announcements with limited thinking. That's coming from PETER Obi. On page 9, Diezani gets a £70,000 bail in alleged £100,000 bribery trial. Federal government draws roadmap to make Nigeria total digital economy. All right, let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian is leading with Labour accepts the federal government's proposals, suspends a strike for 30 days. And on page 3, at the platform, Lumumba, Oyedele, others underscore how to develop Nigeria. Non-interest banking, Taj Bank leads in Tier 1 capital PBT. On page 4, HND, much ado about conversion. 650,000 naira top-up program. Food fair price spike puts more Nigerians under pressure. Cooking gas scarcity looms as price hits 1,000 naira per kg. EFCC obtains arrest warrant on Diezani, begins extradition plan. And lastly, on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, we have Tribunal sacks Sule, declares Ombugadu winner of national polls. All right, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. The Punch is leading with a 6 months allowance. Federal government to spend 315 billion naira. Labour suspends strike for 30 days. Rider says Labour demands wage award for state, local government, private sector workers. 1.5 million federal workers to benefit from government's provisional wage award. And we can also see a photo story showing the government official and Labour leaders. Bribe-taking policemen return to Lagos Road, extorts 25,000 naira from driver. You can read that on page 4. And the stories above. Marketers disagree with Tinubu's tax advisor on refinery sales. You can see that on page 2. Bribery, UK court restricts Diezani's movement. EFCC begins extradition. You can see that on page 8. Chicago Varsity released Tinubu's record to Atiku. And that's how we can take on the front pages of the papers this morning. Join us after the break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. If you're just joining, still today in the news on Vanguard Live, I am Precious Chukudi. And joining me to talk about some of the stories on the front pages of the papers this morning is Mr. Dayo Akintobi, publisher of Ilupeju Today, Keja Today, and Lekki Today. It's good to have you join me this morning, Mr. Dayo.
Good morning to you, Precious. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, let's delve in. And of course, we're talking about federal government and organized labor. The strike was supposed to start today, but it's been suspended for 1 month following an agreement with the federal government. And, in weeks, we've seen how Labour and federal government has had this back and forth on they want to go on strike, even when there was a warning strike and all of that. And even we've seen how even federal government got a court injunction against Labour. Looking at all these things, what do you make of the situation? And why does it look like we take, 10 steps forward and like 20 steps backward?
The fact that they were able to reach a compromise to shelve the strike, because a general strike is the last thing Nigeria needs. At a time when we're all going through the rigor of adjusting to all of the outcome, the fallout of the fuel subsidy removal, high prices, inflation, low wages, all of that has had a debilitating effect on the pocketbook of the average Nigerian. To now compound it with a general strike in a situation where most Nigerians are in the informal economy and they earn their wages on a daily basis. A general strike would have just worsened the condition of the average Nigerian. Even if we say, okay, we are fighting for the long term, Labour is fighting for the welfare of the average Nigerian, but you'd have to take too much of a short term pain, too much of difficulty in the short term for whatever benefits may have come down the road. Now, the idea that Labour now believes that the federal government has committed to certain reforms, and they signed a memorandum of understanding, which means that it's enforceable. If government doesn't do the things they promised to do, Labour can go to court because they have a signed document. However, we've heard many of these same promises before. We're going to put CNG buses. We're going to distribute palliatives. We're going to help MSMEs. We're going to loan money. We've heard many of these promises before, but implementation seems to be the problem. Then there's the issue of the wage increase. They said, the first said 25,000 naira a month for 6 months to the low-level federal government workers. Then they said, when there was an outcry and Labour didn't agree, they increased it to 35,000 and they expanded it to all federal government workers at all levels. Problem is, after 6 months is over, what next happens? Is an extra 35,000 in your pocket for 6 months going to give you enough savings to survive the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years? And then how about those that are not federal government workers? Federal government may encourage the states and say pay your workers as well, but how many states are even able to currently pay the 30,000 minimum wage, let alone an additional 25,000? Then how about those in the private sector, informal workers, people like you and like me? Well, we've been left. I mean, we constitute the majority of the Nigerian labor force, those who are in the private sector, not government workers. What's the percentage of total government workers in Nigeria? So it seems there's nothing for organized private sector. Of course, government can't compel a business to pay its workers a stipend or to pay its workers. Government can't compel that. Businesses are for profit and they will pay based on what their profit lines can afford. So there are some areas that still need to be fleshed out. We also need to monitor implementation. One part I like in there was they put in this thing where there's a joint committee of labor and government that will go and inspect the refineries, because that's part of the problem. If our refineries are up and running, that should theoretically make petrol cheaper, which should reduce cost of transportation. So the fact that the refineries are not operational is part of what has caused this problem. So they said they will form a joint committee where labor will be represented, government, and they'll go around and inspect the refineries to see how this turnaround maintenance project is going. Will these refineries be up and running in December as previously promised? So I like that part. And of course, I like the part about the additional money in the pockets of some government workers. But I don't think the concessions went far enough, but it's a start. It's a good start. At least we are not on general strike sitting at home today. That could be the worst possible outcome for Nigeria. We're all going to work. We're earning a living. We'll work out the details of what. We will flesh them out in the coming days. So it's an overall win-win situation for everybody.
All right. I think there seems to be like this trust deficit between the Labour and federal government, and we've seen this happen, from time to time. Because even though yes, there are talks, we always see that it's either government is not, keeping to their own end of the bargain, and Labour has to come out again and threaten that it's going to be a strike, or they're going to go on a warning strike, or whatever they call it. How do we repair that? Because it's a very big problem, and people are beginning to feel like maybe Labour is not actually Labour. Maybe the new Labour is completely different. Does not really feel the plight of the people, because it's one thing to say, okay, we're having conversations and seeing the actual work, action. We're not seeing that. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, you've alluded to it, but I was going to say that the bigger trust deficit is between Labour and the people, as opposed to Labour and the government, because people no longer have faith in Labour, because every time they are continually rattling their sabers, and at the end of the day, they pull back. Since July, when this issue started, this is about the third time that they've threatened the strike, and they've called it off at the last minute. So some people are saying that, is this Labour, is it this new Labour that you call it? Are they honest? Are they men of integrity? Are they forthright? Because each time they come, They threaten, but we never see any outcome. Even the warning strike was half-hearted. And since July, they've been making a lot of noise, but they never follow through. At the last minute, they always pull back. So the people have lost faith in the labor movement and don't believe that labor is representing their interests. Now, between labor and federal government, I think the issue is they view themselves as antagonists as opposed to people who are partners in seeking the progress of Nigeria. They approach this thing like combatants who are all or nothing. There's no middle ground. Each one wants to have his way fully to the detriment of the average Nigerian. So I think, yes, it's not so much about trust deficit between government and labor. It's about jockeying for advantage. Each one of them wants to do a winner take all. You have to, it's my way or the highway. You either give us all of this or we can't talk. Government will say you either accept what we are offering or we can't talk. So there's no middle ground, and that's why this thing continues to extend and extend and extend. And it seems like they make progress today, and then tomorrow they are back to the negotiating table, and then 10 steps forward, 50 steps backward kind of thing. So I think that I remember in the days of Adams or Shiomole, and even before that, days of people like Pa Ibodu, those who are the real labor activists, the real proper, committed, dedicated men and women of integrity who had the interest of the average Nigerian at heart. And that's what they fought for. There was nothing about any personal aggrandizement. There was no issue of ego. There was no self-perpetuation. None of that. It simply, strictly was all about fighting for the welfare and well-being of the Nigerian worker. Today, I'm not so sure that those in the labor movement are sufficiently motivated to fight for the generality of the Nigerians. I think their interests are a bit narrower. I think their interests may be more self-serving. I think they are more susceptible to coercion, to pressure, to inducement from government. So you'll see these kind of back and forth things happening, because I just think it's the way of the world, the way of Nigeria today is that many people generally, not just the labor movement, many people generally are jaded. We've just lost all semblance of patriotism, all notions of service, and it just seems like everyone is out to survive, because it's just been such a harsh and tough environment to live in, that it's every man for himself now and God for us all. Nobody has the luxury of trying to be able to work in somebody else's interest when you haven't even secured your own well-being.
All right, let's talk about the 35,000 wage award. And Labour is asking that the federal government should extend the time for its continuity till next year, when they are able to sit on the round table and talk about the proposed minimum wage for Nigerians. What do you think about it?
Well, it depends on how much money government has at its disposal. Remember, there's so much oil theft now that we are not even meeting our OPEC quota. And that's the primary source of revenue for government at this point. We're not even meeting our OPEC quota because of a lot of oil theft. So where is government going to get the money to keep? I think, okay, let's do 6 months first. Right? They have to find that money. So they have to find that money to pay this 35,000 or 25,000 for the next 6 months to all government workers. So it's a start. The big question is, after, however long the period is, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, what happens after it stops? That's why we need to have discussions of a permanent wage adjustment. This temporary one, yes, okay, it should give a shot in the arm, make some additional easements for people while we're waiting for the CNG buses and all the refineries. I think what government is looking at is, okay, let's give you something temporary while we're waiting for the longer term things to come in place. Because if the CNG buses come, if the refineries are working, then things should stabilize a bit. transportation should be cheaper, cost of food should go down. So let's just give you temporary succor while we're trying to do the long-term infrastructural adjustments, right? So I think we should be saying, okay, so what we should do is work hard at the implementation of the longer-term infrastructure development so that by the time the temporary money runs out, all these other things will be in place so that there is no gap or there is no shortfall. So I think Labour should calm down for government a bit. Government has said we'll do it for 6 months. That's a good start. So let's start it first. Let's take the money for 6 months. Then what we should do is stay on top of government to make sure these are not just empty promises, that they implement all of these things within the time frame of when the additional income support is in place. Let's not then let the money run out and then the buses haven't come. Let's not let the money run out and then the refineries are not working. Otherwise, it would defeat the purpose. So that's the important thing, is to make sure that we stay on top of government to see that they implement their promises. Promises are easy to make. Government has made a lot of promises. We will do this. We promise to. We assure you. But it's meaningless if it's not implemented. So let Labour stay on top of government, monitor the process, and make sure that they implement and keep their promises.
All right, moving on. Peter Obi has accused the APC-led government of making announcements without thinking and that it has been producing limited outcome. He also mentioned that on fuel subsidy, that he sees fuel subsidy as an organized crime and that the focus should have been on the criminality and corruption side of it. What's your take?
Well, I do agree about the issue of fuel subsidy and the criminality, that as opposed to making 200 million people suffer for the misdeeds of 100 or 200 citizens, that the focus should be have been to bring those who have been defrauding the system, bring them to book and make them pay back all they have stolen. I agree. But what I don't agree with is criticism of the government. It's easy when you're on the other side, right, to sit and say, oh, government did this wrong. Oh, government should have done it this way. Oh, government should have. It's easy. But when you are in there yourself, it's easy. I would have done this. I would have done. Nobody's a magician, right? And until you get there and you sit in that seat, right, and you make a full faith effort to reform the system and to bring about progress, right? It's easy to be a backseat driver or an armchair quarterback and criticize. But I think that until you actually get there, you cannot really understand the challenges that a leader has to grapple with, and that we should give them benefit of the doubt and give them as much support as we can. And if we're going to criticize, I think it should be constructive criticism, and it should be criticism that comes with alternative ideas for solutions, not just by mouthing people and saying, oh, you're just speaking, you're just saying things without thinking. I mean, those are baseless and unfounded and unnecessary vitriol that doesn't serve any government well and doesn't play the opposition role very well either. But having said that, I do agree that the criminality aspect of the subsidy regime should have received a whole lot more attention. I remember from way back, either in the previous administration or the one even before that, this issue of subsidy theft had come up. In the previous administration, that government even admitted that we know those who are stealing this money, we know those who are making fake claims. They will say they brought a ship in full of fuel, they will have all the documentation, they will take it to the government and they will receive the subsidy money for fuel they never even imported. You know, government said they knew those people. So I would have preferred that government go after those people, punish them, lock them up, then collect all the money back and then plug all the loopholes. I actually think that there's nothing wrong with subsidy. There's nothing wrong with subsidizing fuel, subsidizing food, subsidizing fertilizer, helping the people. Those are the dividends of democracy. Those are the things that we should benefit by being Nigerians. And of course, they say, well, it got corrupted by fraud. So I think the fraud is what you should address. I think, but you see, the problem is government is complicit. There is no way that somebody will come and file a subsidy claim for fuel they didn't import without somebody in government facilitating that paperwork and the payment. So government is complicit. So who polices the police? Government won't police itself. And government is complicit, so government is part of the corruption. But In truth, in a better ordered society, that's what should have happened, was that the criminal aspect of the subsidy regime is what should have been investigated, should have been brought to book, should have been prosecuted, should have been punished, the stolen money should have been recovered, people should have been locked up, and the loopholes should have been plugged. Then Nigerians could have continued to enjoy the little benefit we're getting from the national cake. So I agree with that.
All right, Nigeria at 63, where are we headed as a nation? What is our destination?
That's interesting. Well, the general consensus is that based on all our God-given endowments, we are not as far along the trajectory of our destiny as we should be. At 63, you are no longer a toddler, you are no longer an infant, you've come of age. And at 63, by now, based on all the God-given endowments we have, we should be further along. But let's remember, we are a nation of 200 million people. That's a lot of people to manage. And even as much as wealthy as a country Nigeria is, it's still very difficult to administer 200 million people. Having said that, I don't think we've done well in terms of poverty. I think with the kind of resources we have, poverty shouldn't be as widespread as it is in the country. We shouldn't still be having things like child mortality, of infant mortality, things like life expectancy, things like potable water, the basics. I think by this stage in a nation's life, we should have covered the basics. I think we should by now be looking at the bigger picture. But at this point, we're still grappling with roads. We're still grappling with housing shortages. We're still grappling with health. Look, in Lagos, for example, I think a large percentage of Lagos homes don't have direct pipe-borne water from the water corporation. We're still either digging bore wells or we're buying water from public sources. So these are developmental indices that are basic, that a country like Nigeria should have long ago passed and now be thinking about putting a man on the moon or developing a flying car or, clean air. We should be, in the digital age. We're still battling analog things like potholes in the road, flooding, water supply, no electricity, things that are basic, no COVID vaccination in the hospitals, no oxygen in the hospitals, no textbooks in the schools. So we haven't lived up to our potential, but I think the future is bright. I think there are a lot of intelligent and motivated Nigerians, and I think as long as we have the right leadership, as long as we have inspirational leadership, as long as we have leaders who nurture us to believe in ourselves and believe in our potential to be great, and who inspire us to greatness, who motivate us to be selfless, to give our best, to sacrifice for the greater good. As long as because you see, leadership is so important, because when you see leaders who are out for themselves, who are serving themselves and their small little circle of acolytes and friends and family, it doesn't inspire you. Like, look, for example, now government say we should sacrifice. We are the ones that are bearing the brunt of fuel subsidy removal. But do you see government making any sacrifice? You see all their long convoys, you see them appointing 200. Yesterday, one state governor appointed 184 aides. He has one more year in office. He appointed 100 plus special assistants. Each of them is going to draw a salary. Each of them is going to have an official vehicle. Each of them is going to have an office. Look at the expense. So government is not sacrificing. They're asking us to sacrifice. We are the ones that are paying 600 naira per liter. We are the ones that are paying 1,000 naira per derica of rice now, and 1,000 naira per kg of cooking gas. So these things they don't inspire us to want to pull our weight for the collective good, because nobody else is doing it. So why should we? So this is the thing. Nigeria at 63. Well, let's hope Nigeria at 73, we would have begun to make better progress, and maybe people would have begun to put the collective interest over the individual interest.
All right, let's touch on Diezani's issue, and of course, was over an alleged 100,000 pounds of bribe, and she was granted a bail of 70,000 pounds, rather a bail, and she was also imposed other terms, including a 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew, and electronic tag to be worn by her all at all times, and also the surety to be paid. That's the 70,000 pound surety before she could even leave the court building yesterday. And looking at the situation, also the information that EFCC is trying to also extradite her down to Nigeria to also come and face her own charges here. What do you think about the situation surrounding her?
The lady seems to have more lives than a cat. She has more than 9 lives, I think. Because look at it's been over 8 years, 10 years since the Good Luck administration ended, and she's managed to escape the long arm of the law to this point. First thing, I don't understand why EFCC now is trying to extradite her, because she's under the jurisdiction of the UK court. So until that UK court finishes with her, there's no issue of extradition until she finishes her trial. The extradition doesn't come into place. When she hadn't been charged here and she was free to be extradited, EFCC didn't file for extradition then. It's now that they know they want to extradite her. They're a bunch of jokers. They're not serious people. Now, the way I look at it, this case is just the tip of the iceberg. I think it's just the beginning. She's accused of bribing, but remember, this is just 100,000 pounds. This is a lady who Nigeria alleged stole billions of Nigeria's wealth. Billions. So 100,000 is just a drop in the ocean of what she's alleged to have taken. But I think this case might be the one that opens the Pandora's box. I think revelations might come out during this trial, right, that expose her to culpability or expose her to possible litigation for the things she's accused of having done in office. This is just a small one. They say she bribed or received or gave a bribe relating to a Nigerian contract that has some British nexus, right? So the British will try her, but in the process of that court process, remember, it's in the public view. I think a lot of things will come out that will give us some insight into some of the things that she did while in office that may now give us grounds to actually be able to build a proper case against her and prosecute her for the atrocities she committed in Nigeria. So I think it's a good thing. It's taking 10 years, because I think the Good Luck administration left in 2015, and this is 2023. So it's 8 years plus. 8 years plus that she has managed to escape being coming to account. Nobody has said she's guilty of anything yet. It's just allegations. But once allegations are against you, you should stand up and defend yourself, not go and hide in another country for 8 years. If she's innocent of the things that have been said of her, why has she been dodging in the UK? At one point, we saw pictures of her. They said she had cancer. She was in hospital. I saw her in the court yesterday. I'm in the UK myself right now. I didn't get a chance to go to the court, but she was on UK TV. I saw her looking dazzling, looking the picture of perfect health, looking beautiful, looking radiant. There's somebody when Nigeria wanted her. She said, "Oh, I'm sick." They showed a picture of her in hospital with a drip going in her arm. That was all just theater for the cameras. Truth be told, she has been dodging from coming to defend the allegations against her. I think this current filing is going to force her to now have to defend the allegations against her, because I think this UK case will open up a lot more about what went down in her leadership of the petroleum industry in Nigeria 8 years ago.
All right, let's take a look at Mr. and Mrs. before we go. And Mr. is speaking. It says, caveat emptor is a phrase that means let the buyer beware, sometimes used in legal contracts as type of disclaimer. So before you buy that necklace on credit, caveat emptor. And Mrs. says, we're sleeping separately starting tonight, so caveat emptor in advance.
Okay.
Let the buyer beware in advance.
Yes, let Mr. as the buyer beware. It's okay. All right. More power to you, Mrs. I don't think husband and wife should sleep separate anyway, but if Mrs. is trying to make a point, Mr. better take heed. It's all good.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Daya Akintobi. Thank you for sharing your thought with us this morning.
Pleasure is all mine. I apologize to Nigerians for the network issues. Sorry about that, but hopefully we got to do a good show. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Also, remember that you can equally like, share, and subscribe on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. To find out up-to-date stories, go to our website, www.vanguardngl.com, to find out more. I am Precious Chukudi, and thank you for watching.